Hi, this is Dan Cortopassi of TSG Multimedia. Welcome to Model Railroading 101. I'm here in front of the camera, and John is behind the camera making everything look good.
He's trying to make everything look good once again.
Yeah. So anyway, today we're going to talk about getting started in model railroading. And by getting started, I mean if you have nothing, no trains at all, and walked into a hobby shop, what would you need? So before we talk about that, though, I think it's important to kind of define some goals. Like, what are you trying to do with the train? What do you want it for? Is it for you? Is it a gift for someone else? Do you just want a train to run around the Christmas tree or something like that? Or are you trying to create the Union Pacific in 1942?
Or if you're Dan and you want to create the Southern Pacific, the Santa Fe, Western Pacific, the TSG Railroad, what else, Dan?
Whatever. Yeah, I know. I'm silly with it. But anyway, that's not the topic for today.
Well, no, but I think you bring up something important, which is what are your goals, right?
Right. Because that may affect what you want to buy, what kind of trains you're looking for. There are different kinds of trains. There's, old time trains, there's modern diesels, there's, all kinds of things.
Electrics.
Right. Trolleys, so it kind of depends on what your interests are and, who is the train intended for. So having said all that, let's start talking about the components you actually need and how to go about getting them. So what do you need? Well, the first and most obvious thing is a train. Here's one.
Well, here's a locomotive anyway, right?
It's a locomotive,
the
right?
Front of the train.
Well, any train that's going to go anywhere needs a locomotive. Otherwise, it's just a string of cars, and that's not very fun.
You could go downhill.
Yeah, you could roll them downhill, but that's probably not the most fun thing.
Yeah.
So you're going to need at least one locomotive. And then you're probably going to want some cars to go with it. So, There's a car and here's another car. And
maybe a caboose if that's appropriate to your era, right?
Right. So that's the first part, is you need a train of some kind. The second important thing is track, because trains don't really work very well without it.
Yeah.
So, and you basically have straight track and you have curved pieces. There's another straight piece and another curved piece. And they also have switches, which are turnouts, which allow you to, basically switch one way or the other. This basically takes one track and makes it into two.
It's kind of a splitter, right?
Yeah. So the train can take one route or take a different route. And most of the time most people when they start out, they're going to want enough to make an oval.
Right.
Typically
or a circle, right?
Or a circle, yeah. So anyway, that's basically the second thing. And the other thing you need if you want the train to actually run is a power pack of some kind.
Yeah, to regulate the power, huh?
Right. Now, this is a DC power pack. There's also a thing called DCC, and we have another program on what the differences are. If you want to look at that, it's one of the other episodes of Model Railroading 101. So I'm not going to go into that too much here. I think for the purposes of today's discussion, we can just confine ourselves to DC power packs, because that's typically what would come with a train set if you want to get a train set. So
yeah. Speaking of train sets, I mean, that's one way you can get everything, right? I mean,
yeah, it is. So why don't we take a look at a couple of those? So here's a train set like you might find, in a hobby shop or even a toy store sometimes, or online. And they typically will come with, a locomotive, a couple of cars, maybe a caboose, enough track to make an oval, and some kind of a power pack.
Yeah, or in this case, a circle. This is a circle track.
Okay, a circle.
And so this comes with everything we just talked about.
Right. So that's really what you're getting when you get a train set. You're getting some equipment with a locomotive, you're getting track, and you're getting a power pack. So you can actually run it. So this is a different train set. This one is in N scale, which is a little smaller than the HO one we just looked at. This is also a little more expensive set, and it comes with more stuff. As you can see, this one has a locomotive and 5 cars in a caboose. The other one only had 2 cars in a caboose. Yeah. It also comes with some additional track. And instead of just making a circle, this one actually has some straight pieces to make an oval. And it comes with a better power pack.
Yep.
So the point to this is that, you kind of get what you pay for. the more you spend on the train set, the better quality it's going to be. And I know some people are hesitant, especially if it's like for a kid or something, to spend too much money because they don't know if they're going to like it. But I would suggest to try to get the best one you can because it'll run better and last longer. And if you get one that's too cheap, it may not run very well at all, even when it's new.
Mm-hmm.
And that will discourage someone from getting interested real fast because nothing is, less fun than a train set that doesn't work. This is the locomotive from the first train set we looked at, which is a pretty inexpensive model.
Yeah, it's a low end.
Yeah, pretty low end. I realize we have 3 different kinds of engines here, but I think you can see that the detail on this one is fairly crude. And, it's not really that authentic or anything. If it's for a small child or something like that, less detail sometimes can be better because the more detailed something is, the more prone it is to getting broken.
Parts break off, right?
Right. So that's another consideration. This engine here, the gray one, I would consider to be kind of mid-range to upper level in quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can see there's kind of a huge difference. Even though these are different engines, I mean, the detail on this one is much better.
It has finer pieces on it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and, it's just a much better quality, piece of equipment. This one in the back is more of a high-end engine. And, again, the detail is better. It's, got really good paint on it. But, like I said, it's got a lot of little tiny parts on it. And even I have to be careful handling this thing so I don't break something. So, that's a consideration.
Yeah, and speaking of this, I think that goes to what we were talking about in the beginning, which is the application you have in mind.
Right.
Because the one on the far left, the cheap piece of junk, I got that just to run in a circle around the Christmas tree many years ago.
Right.
And that train set cost like, $35, $40, something like that. It wasn't really intended to run as a real train might.
Right.
So,
right.
And I guess that's really what we're talking about in terms of, when we're saying about application, something just for a little kid or your nephews,
right.
To beat the hell out of.
Right.
Probably would the $35 or $40 one is fine. But if it's like a 12-year-old or 14-year-old kid that's interested in this stuff, maybe the one in the middle, right?
Yeah. And these, an engine like this can actually be enhanced with some, weathering and things like that if you're into that. And we have videos on doing that kind of stuff. But, there's a lot of potential in something like this to make it look really realistic.
Not much on that one on the left, though.
Yeah, I don't think I would bother with that one.
Big difference in quality here, too.
Yeah, so these are a couple of cabooses, obviously. This one is from that same inexpensive train set, the red one. And this other one is a fairly high-end model that, a serious model railroader would have. So this kind of shows the difference, and runs the gamut in terms of what you can get. This actually looks like a real caboose.
Yeah, shrunken
this looks
down.
like a toy.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm looking at this red one, and I'm seeing straight through the cupola. And the one on the right, it looks like it even has a window on it, so you can't even see into it, let alone through it.
Right. And this one has other neat stuff on it, like lights and things. But, the point is, again, is just that there's a big variation in quality depending on, what you buy. So I wanted to show this because this is a little bit different kind of a train set. This is an N-scale set from Kato, and this is actually a fairly high-end set. But this only includes the locomotive and the cars. There's no track, no power pack. So it's not really a beginner set. It's meant for someone who already has somewhere to run the train and some way to do that.
Oh, right. So like you already have a layout or you belong to a club with a layout?
Right.
I get it.
Right. So there are sets like this too. So if you're going and looking for an entry-level set, make sure you get one that comes with the track and the power pack and all that stuff in it already.
Oh, right. Otherwise you'll have it's like having a car with no gas in it or something.
Yeah, you
right?
have a very nice train with no way to run it.
Little Johnny would have to just look at it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, again, here we have,
El Cheapo.
a cheap car, and here we have a not so cheap car. But they will work together. I don't know that a lot of people would want to run something nice with something less nice, but
Yeah. So there are standards then.
right.
For
That's one of the things that's cool nowadays is that most of the equipment is interoperable. So if you get a train set and you want to expand it, you can buy, you don't have to buy the same brand. In other words, you could buy cars from other manufacturers and they should still work together. And if you want to, you might start out with an entry level train set and then later on get some better stuff and, you can run it together.
Oh, cool. So the track works together too, huh?
No, that's what I was going to mention. This is some Kato track and this is Bachmann track, and they do not mate.
Oh, you'd have to push really hard.
You can't, because this thing's in the way. It won't,
Yeah, you'd have to push so hard it broke.
So, this is Kato with Kato works just fine, and the Bachmann with the Bachmann works just fine. But if you're going to buy this type of track, which is what I would call prefab or something like that, you may have trouble getting it to work together. Now, if you buy the more traditional track that doesn't have the roadbed attached, it's a little more flexible in terms of what you can put together with what.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a little bit more difficult to deal with if you're just setting up something initially. This kind of prefab stuff is a little easier to use. So let's say that you've decided not to buy a train set and you want to just buy separate pieces. Maybe you found some trains you like and just want to use those and get your own track and your own power pack. This is a package of Kato 24-inch radius curve track, and this includes 4 pieces. And they're saying that this is 22.5 degrees. What that means is each section of curve track is 22.5 degrees of a circle.
And you need 360 if you want a circle.
Right. So you put 2 of these together is 45, another 2. Put the other 2 together, you get 90 degrees. That's a quarter circle. So if you want to make a whole circle, you need to buy 4 packages of this stuff.
Oh, boy.
Okay. So you just got to make sure that you get enough track that you're going to be able to do what you want. And then you can always add straight pieces and things like that to make an oval or whatever. But you don't want to just buy one package of this and think you're done, because it's not going to get you all the way around. You know what I mean? So it's just important to keep that in mind.
So maybe a little bit of planning, right? Ahead of time.
Yeah, that would help. Also, the other thing about curves, this is 24-inch radius, this is HO scale, and that's a good minimum radius. You can go down to 22, but you don't want to go too much sharper than that. I mean, you can get by with 18 sometimes, but I've seen 15-inch radius track in the hobby shop, and I wouldn't recommend buying that unless you're running trolleys or something, because equipment just doesn't like curves that are that sharp in HO. So we'll have another episode on track and kind of the ins and outs of that at some point, but it is just something to keep in mind. You don't want to go too tight with the curves.
So you want the curves, as wide as possible? As
wide as possible. Now keep in mind that this is 24-inch radius. That means that to make a circle is going to be 4 foot or 4 feet in diameter. Okay, so you're going to have a fairly large space or a fairly large table to put that on if you want to put it on a table, which is another consideration, is how much room do you have?
We talked about that in the scale class, right?
Right. I kind of gave a rule of thumb that would tell you about how much space each scale will take.
Right.
So I won't want to go into that in too much detail here, but basically in HO, you're looking at probably something on the order of 4 by 8 feet. You could maybe go 4 by 6, but it's going to be something like that if you want a circle. In N scale, it's about half of that, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet or 2 feet by 4 feet. We were talking about how much space something will take up. I just thought I'd show a couple different scales here. Now, we've already had a program on scale, so if you want to watch that, I would recommend watching that.
There's more information there.
Right. But just to recap briefly, this is HO, this larger engine is HO, and the smaller one is N scale. And these are the 2 most popular scales. They're also the two most economical scales, which is a consideration if you're buying trains either separately or as a set. You go smaller than this, it starts to get more expensive. You go bigger than this, it starts to get more expensive. These two are probably, HO is probably the most economical if you're looking for that. It also has the most variety of stuff available. N scales maybe a little bit, not too much more, but maybe slightly more expensive in some cases. And there's not quite as much available, but there's a lot available in N too.
I'm kind of curious now because the really cheap train set that we showed in the beginning that had a locomotive, 2 cars, a caboose, a circle of track, and a power pack was about $40.
Okay.
Okay. So what do you think the range would be for, say $40 on the cheapest end up to...
Yeah, that's really cheap.
Yeah, I know. And it's a piece of junk. So
Yeah.
I mean, it looks cheap.
I mean, you usually can't even get a locomotive for that much. You're looking at a few $100s.
okay.
easily.
So you can go anywhere from 40 to what? 400?
400 or 500, yeah, easy.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just
In
trying to
that range.
get an idea, to give
Yeah.
people an idea of what the range is.
Right. But you don't have to buy $40 freight cars either. You can buy very nice $20 freight cars,
Sure.
So, I mean, there's a big range.
You could also buy a better locomotive than the one that came with that for probably 80 or $90 too, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. One thing I will say, I think it's very worth it to buy a quality locomotive because it will run really well and it will last a long time.
yeah.
My personal preference is go for quality over quantity. I think you're better off buying one really good locomotive and maybe a couple of cars than buying 3 junky locomotives and 50 junky cars.
Uh-huh.
Because, you can make a really long train, but it's going to run terrible and,
probably derail and uncouple all over the place.
Right, right. Whereas if you buy good stuff, it'll work the way it's supposed to.
So you think a more gradual approach where you're just buying good stuff but saving up for a month and then buying one good
That
car?
would be what I would do.
Yeah.
If I was to be starting over in the hobby. I know, there is a certain thrill, I guess you could say, that comes with getting a train set that's all in one box and it's like, oh, this is neat, But yeah, if I were to start over, I would probably just buy individual things and, just accumulate stuff and
Build it slowly.
Yeah. And then eventually you get to have a storage room full of trains like I do. Some other things to think about are era. For example, this little engine would have been from the 1800s, late 1800s
Mm-hmm.
kind of vintage. Something like this is more like 1920s to 50s.
Okay.
This is modern.
Yes.
This is what you see running around today. Now, a little engine like this would look great pulling some old-time passenger cars, would look very silly pulling a modern container train.
Oh, yeah. That didn't even exist back then.
Right. So, I know some people don't care so much about that, but it is something to think about if you're going to start in the hobby and you kind of want to, maybe you have an idea of what you like.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of stick to it. Another thing is region. For example, this engine in the middle is a Norfolk and Western engine that would have run in Virginia and in the East Coast. BNSF is mostly west of the Mississippi. So you might want to kind of focus on some geographic region that appeals to you.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, if some people like European trains are very different than North American trains. Some people like Japanese trains. Those are very different than North American trains. So it's, it really looks better to kind of focus on some area, because you wouldn't see these 3 engines together unless it was a museum.
Right. Or on our table.
Or on our table.
During
Right.
Model Railroading 101.
Right. I give you one admonishment. Even if you're using this kind of track that has the ballast built in, don't put it on carpet and run it around on the floor.
And why is that?
Because carpet fibers love to get inside the gears, inside where the wheels are on these engines,
Yeah.
and it'll
They'll
make
wreak
them run.
havoc.
Yeah, it's really not good for them. They'll run really bad, and you won't know why, and just don't do it, okay?
Yeah, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
You get your locomotive all full of carpet fibers and wonder why it's not running.
Yeah, trust me, I know this from experience.
Do you know, when I was a little kid, I set up my trains in the dirt.
Oh, God.
HO scale trains.
Yeah, if you want a garden railroad, that's a whole nother thing. Those are usually a lot bigger.
Yeah, it looked very realistic, but it didn't run very well, I remember.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully that'll give you some idea of what you would need to get started in the hobby. And I certainly would encourage people to get started because it's a great hobby.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of fun, and, you can make a lot of good friends doing it, too.
Yeah, and you learn a lot, too. I mean, there's all kinds of aspects to it. There's, carpentry, electronics.
Yeah, if you're building
research.
If you're building a layout, and not to get too, complicated, but if you're going to do DCC, or even if you're not going to do DCC, if you're building a layout, you have to know measuring, math, that whole carpentry thing, design.
Right.
You have to know about electronics, or you have to learn about electronics. There's a lot of stuff that a parent might not think of that when they're considering maybe getting little Johnny started in this hobby. Right. They might just think, oh, it's expensive. But there's a lot of value in that.
There is. And you learn a lot by doing it. I've learned a lot by doing it.
Dan didn't get to be the genius he is strictly by reading books.
Wow. I don't know about that. But anyway.
All right.
So...
what are we going to talk about next time, Dan?
Next time, I think we're going to talk about different types of equipment, like, what types of freight cars there are in locomotives and things like that.
Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm raising my hand. People can't see this off camera. Can I go? Class excused? I can go to the bathroom now?
Yes, class dismissed.